you. So, Mr. John Nieuwenburg.
Thanks very much, Mark. And irony is being 2 minutes late for a time management seminar. Hey, Mark, do you see my screen?
I see it. Your personal relationship.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And if I could encourage everyone to go to full screen themselves and get the benefit of the entire slide presentation. So without further ado, let's get started. So tonight we want to talk about your personal relationship with time. How many people feel like this guy, like the hamster in the wheel? Or perhaps you feel like you've got too many balls in the air. Do you ever feel like you want to push back the hands of time? Or maybe you feel like this guy running around. I know it's kind of gruesome, but nevertheless, some of us feel like we're running around like a chicken without a head. Maybe we're juggling time. Perhaps we have time on our hands. Some of us think we're playing whack-a-mole. You know that circus game? The mole comes out of the base there, and you just give it a good whack. And that's sometimes how some of us organize priorities. Whatever the next thing that comes up is the thing we give it a whack. Some of us feel like we're on a merry-go-round. And tonight I'm going to ask you the question: who'd like to get off that merry-go-round and think about time in a different way than they have been up until now, or at least think about becoming more productive? So time management is a bit of an illusion. Some of you see a vase. Some of you may see two people, male profiles. The one on the right, the black one, I can keep both of them in perspective. I don't know if others are like me. The one on the left, I can only see one at a time, either the left or the right one for the gold vase. So what is time management? Wikipedia has a very formal definition. Time management is the active process of planning, exercising, blah, blah, blah. Time management is a system designed a combination of process, tools, techniques, and methods. And tonight, what I'd like for, what I hope you'd be able to take away from is a little bit about the strategies of managing time, but more importantly, at least in my view, is a strategy rather than tactics. So a strategy on how to manage time, and along with a few tactics to help implement those strategies. So that's what the outcome that I'm looking for, or hoping that you'll have tonight. So a few minutes on my background. I've been a business coach since 2004. I was certified. Prior to that, in 1991, I was the managing director of the BC liquor stores. To give you some sense of scale, today they do about 2.9 billion and about 900 million in profit. And prior to that, I was with Tip Top Tailors for 17 years. Started as a sales guy in a store in Winnipeg, and over 17 years lived in 10 cities in 12 of those years. And ultimately, I was an executive in the company in Toronto. And as I said earlier, I wanted to get back to Vancouver, and so I got myself headhunted, recruited, and became the managing director of the BC liquor stores. When not coaching, I love to do some golf, skiing, read a lot. I think my estimate is I've read about 500 books in my life, which sounds like a lot perhaps, but given that I'm 59, I estimate that I've read 10 books a year for 50 years, so 500 isn't that crazy a number. Some lovely people here on LinkedIn have given me some endorsements, and along with some testimonials on my website, and so it's not just me and my mom who are saying some lovely things about me. So that's all I really wanted to do in terms of background. Our goal for today is to have some BFOs, so that's blinding flashes of the obvious. That's often accompanied with kind of a smack to the forehead as you realize just how obvious it is. But that's the thing about BFOs, we only see them as obvious after they've become apparent to us. So I hope for tonight, my goal for tonight is that you have a number of BFOs. So time is our most precious resort. Time is more important than money. Once you've spent your money, you can always make some more. Once you've spent your time, you can't get it back. That's a quote that I've kind of modified from the great business philosopher Jim Rohn. So you equal your calendar. The results you have today are a perfect reflection of how you occupy your calendar, the content of your calendar, and how well you execute that calendar. And as Tom Peters says, calendars never lie. You equal your calendar. And so the proposition for tonight is if you're happy with your results, awesome. If you'd like some change, some different results in one or more areas of your business, then something about how your calendar, something about what occupies or how you use your time has to change. So closing back or coming back on the loop, your personal relationship with time, there's three general areas, three buckets, let me call them, of where we sometimes fall apart when it comes to how we use time. So those technical things are things like tasks have no home. You've set aside the wrong time or the wrong amount of time, miscalculated, wrong person for the job, tasks are more complex than you wanted, can't remember what you have to do, your space is disorganized. So those are, just some things that are relatively easy fixes. Maybe there's some external realities. Maybe you have an unrealistic workload. Maybe you have health problems. Perhaps you're in transition. You're in an interruption-rich environment. And I bet everyone on the call would especially feel that way, especially if you're in a service-based business and feel like you have to respond to the emails or phone calls or tweets or posts that come from your clients. Or perhaps you have a disorganized partner and that disorganization is creeping into your life. Be perfect that we never ship and we never get it done, we never put it out the door. Or you have a fear of losing control or creativity. So Stephen Covey says that there's been three generations, largely speaking, three generations of time management. The first of which was managing a task list or a to-do list and making sure everything that you needed to do was on that list. And then we evolved and got busy with day timers, personal organizers. We all walked around with something in our pocket or purse that kept a record of what we were attempting to do and how we booked out our time. And the third generation is this one that's organized around roles and values, and that's the one I want to unpack a little bit more tonight. So our dilemma as we move through time is characterized by this watch, this actual real watch, which on one hand we've got the clock of scheduling, stuff to do, people to see, meetings to make, and on the other hand we've got the compass of purpose and values. What's our North Star? What are we aiming at? What are we hoping to achieve over the longer course of time? So the clock of scheduling versus the compass of purpose and values. And so life, like Nick Walanda here, who's on a high wire and got a balancing beam, our life feels sometimes like we have to balance between the things we want to get done now or today and the things we want to get done before you retire, before you die, sometime in your career, this business. So in any given day, in any given week, that's the challenge. You've got a big bucket on your left of this balancing beam, and that's the total sum of our to-dos, our tasks, our meetings, the clients we've got to work with, the prospects we'd like to meet. And then on the other hand, we've got, hey, what do I want to accomplish in 5 years' time? And that stuff on the left is all important and urgent, but often the total sum of accomplishing that over time, through time, doesn't necessarily add up to anything. And that's why we have to have a view on the right-hand side of our balance beam where we've got a longer view this quarter, this year, and in fact, even before I die. And so one way to think about this is if you were to write your own eulogy, and you can imagine having someone near and dear to you reading or offering a eulogy for you, you can imagine the kind of eulogy that you might like to have, that you were a terrific person, that you had accomplished great things, that you had a great family and partnership, etc. And so the thought today is, what do I have to do? How do I have to live so that when that eulogy is pronounced, that it's real and it's accurate? And that's the big dilemma, that's the big paradox, that's the big fight that we have every day, figuring out how to balance those two priorities. So first things first, what's the purpose of my or your business? Why do we have a business? And many times people think, well, to make profit or to accomplish some great goals or to keep people employed or to bring something to market. But what I'm going to offer you tonight is this definition. The purpose of business is to give us the life we want. The purpose of my business is to give us the life we want. Now, I know for sure that when you're expressing this to your client teams, to your employee teams, this isn't how you're going to express it. But personally, inside of us, that's what we want. Our business is meant to give us our life. And we weren't born to do business, we were born to live. And so one of the propositions I'd like to make is this, that if we want to live our life, then our business has to support that life. And so first, let's define our life so that we then build and shape the business that's going to give us that life. So we start with the idea of what is the life we want. The second half of this question is about you. And Dr. Seuss put it lovely when he said, today you are you, that's truer than true. There's no one alive who's youer than you. And so my question for you on this subject is, do you have a written definition of the perfect you, of the best you can be? Who are you becoming? What set of beliefs will you have? What sort of human being will you be? And so those are the two big aims that we have as entrepreneurs and as business people, to become the best person, the best being we can be, and to build the business that gives us that life. So if we accept that definition, then time management starts with the big question of what do we want out of life? And here I'm offering one way to think about that, and that is this exercise called the wheel. For example, with finance in your life, your level of wealth, your level of income, however you define that on a scale of 1 to 10. And on personal growth, are you closer to 1 or closer to 10? And on health, are you currently closer to 1 or closer to 10? And as you go all the way around and mark that for yourself, when you get around to the end, often when people then connect the dots, as they go from one role to the next role to the next role, for most people what comes out is a very jagged looking wheel. And that gives you a pretty good visualization of what your life looks like. Not as round, full, and complete as this one, but jagged, out of balance, out of alignment. And so one thing you might want to do as an exercise to get back on track is, what would have to happen? Ask yourself this question, so that in a year's time, or even just 90 days' time, you would be able to come back to this exercise and express or be able to report that you were at a level of satisfaction. So at the minimum, what you might like to do is identify which 3 roles you're most unsatisfied with, or the least satisfying, that are the most important to you, and what would you have to do, what goals, what results would you have to achieve in order to be able to report satisfaction in 90 days, in 3 months, or in 12 months, or say, for example, even 5 years. So that gives us a bit of a better picture of what our life is supposed to be, and gives you a way to think about how to file a navigation plan for your life. Lots of people, it's true, spend more time planning their vacation than they do planning their life. Another way that this can be done is this thing called a vision board. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Again, I'd encourage you to Google, and I'm going to offer you a particular site. And in this particular example, someone's used a chalkboard and written out some of the things that are going to make their ideal, their perfect life is expressed on this board. So I see a $sign that says create a mobile app, make millions, or win the lotto. One of those two is probably more realistic, or become a wine connoisseur, or market a band, etc. That's how this person's defined that for themselves. There's no right way to do it. Here's another example. Someone's kind of used this scheme to organize themselves and create a life vision. And this is pretty much along the lines of what Pamela was talking about earlier in her presentation. alignment happens and clarity happens when you're able to express this clearly for yourself. You know Oprah would have a take on this, and if you went to Oprah's website, you can see the website down at the bottom. The URL is oprah.com dreamboard-index. And here she's got a tool that she's created that will help you take you through building your vision board. If that probably will help you take you through that if you're looking for some support in making your own dream board come together. So shifting away then from that and back into how to then we use time in order to accomplish those things, kind of using a metaphor of a car, you'll notice that it's a British or right-hand drive car, and you'll see in the front seat of this car on the left we've got the urgent and important, and on the right behind the steering wheel we've got the not urgent and important. That's the thing guiding the ship or mission of your life. Quadrant 3 is the urgent and not important, and quadrant 4 not urgent and not important. And let's just kind of walk through all the way that. The one on the upper left is the quadrant of necessity. The one on the right is the quadrant of leadership and quality. Bottom right is quadrant of waste, and bottom left is quadrant of deception. That's delusional stuff that keeps you busy but isn't really productive. So walking around that chart a little more in detail, the quadrant of necessity is all that stuff that happens to us every day. The phone rings, the email's going, clients are, have expectations, prospects we want to meet, meetings we've got to make. And in this area, there's no question it has to be paid attention to. And the goal here is to manage this the best you can. On the top right, the quality of personal leadership, the important and not urgent. This is the area that you might think about. I think it's Abraham Lincoln or George Washington. One of those two guys is attributed with this idea that if they were given an hour to chop a tree, they'd spend the first 30 minutes sharpening the saw. Albert Einstein used a similar idea when he said if he was given an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend the first 50 minutes making sure that he had the right question, and then therefore that the solving the problem would be easy. So this is the side of our lives that says if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. If you do have an outcome or a picture of what your perfect life would be, it's in this quadrant that we work that out. So preparation and planning, prevention, values, clarification, etc. You can see the list is there. The bottom right is this quadrant of waste. So that's a lot of trivia, busy work, junk mail, phone mails, time wasters, etc. Escape activities, mindless TV viewing. I, for one, can offer that I've done some of that in the past, viewing mindless TV shows. Hey, what's on TV tonight? And then on the left, bottom left is this quadrant of deception or delusion, which is that track of, oh, I'm going to do some social media marketing, and then we go down the rabbit hole of Facebook, where we start off with the idea that we're doing some marketing, but soon we're wondering about someone's new baby or what someone did at the party last week, or certainly a long ways away from the original intention of doing some marketing. So when we put that all together, that's what this little mind map looks like. And if I direct your attention to the very top, it says the top two, the quadrant of quality and personal leadership, directly impacts how easy or hard it is to manage the quadrant of necessity. And I think that's Stephen Covey's way of saying, how do we balance the balance beam on the high wire act? The better we get on the right-hand side, the easier it is to manage the left-hand side. So there again, for emphasis, the quadrant of quality and personal leadership directly impacts how easy or hard it is to manage the quadrant of necessity. So time management is this. We've been talking a bit of strategy. Let me give you a tactic. So time management looks like this. The first question you have to ask yourself as you're thinking about time management is, what results matter to you most? What results matter to me most this week? What results matter to me most in 5 years? What is the appropriate thing for me to be doing today so that that 5-year thing becomes accomplishable? There's always tension. There's always elastic fighting, competing between those two ends. Sometimes it's more on the left, sometimes more on the right. But the question you always want to start with is, what results matter to me most? Next then falls, what activity, what do I got to do to produce those results? What kinds of things is going to get me a new client? What kinds of things is going to get me a relationship, a personal relationship that I'm happy with, a relationship with my friends, my family? What are the things I have to do in order to produce those results? And then the next question, of course, is how much? How many phone calls do I have to make? Or do I get to make? How much would I like to visit with my family, my partner, my friends? We then have to book out some time. You know, the danger, many people are really good at figuring out the first three on the list, but then don't book out or block out the time and kind of operate in that world of round to it, when I get around to it. And, you know, all of us have the experience that knows that we never get around to it, because if it's not in our calendar, it just won't get done. And then finally, the fifth and maybe the hardest thing is integrity in the moment. When it comes to that time, 10 o'clock on Wednesday, when you've said, I'm going to eat that frog, or do something that is tough for me to do, make some calls, you have to have some integrity in that moment. And we get to pay either one of two pains all the time: the pain of discipline or the pain of disappointment. The pain of discipline of doing it in the moment, or the pain of disappointment in not getting the results that we want, either for ourselves this week or in 5 years' time, or whatever time frame we're thinking about. So those are the big keys. And when you do that, you'll have a calendar that looks like this. This is a typical calendar. This is an old example about 5, 6 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, of what a business coach might do in blocking out. This is a business coach with 0 to 3 clients, and you can see the coaching, or the time that are indicated in black. Those are the times meeting with a client. The time in sort of ochre or orange diagnostics is the time that I would be meeting with a prospect and conducting a diagnostic, or if you think about it in terms of going to a doctor, asking questions until I arrive at a prognosis or a solution. Might do some cold calling, have to do some networking Wednesday morning, reading and learning. And so this default diary answers all those questions. What results do I want? What activity produces those results? How much of those activity? When am I going to do it? And then finally, of course, having integrity in the moment, that when it turns 9 o'clock on Monday morning and it says emails and to-dos, and now it's time to do some cold calling, that's in fact what I'm going to do. So some productivity, some more tactics. Plan your day and week before they start. The most productive time, I urge you to consider this, the most productive time you can have in a week is 20 minutes that you spend on Sunday with your balance beam, organizing your week, thinking about what are the things I've got to get done this week, and what are the things I can do this week to get closer to my 5-year goals, my lifelong goals, etc. To make that, to use those 20 minutes will amplify or sharpen that axe, so that when you apply it through the rest of the week, you'll do that with a higher level of effectiveness. The best time to plan your day is the day before. So tonight, before you finish your day, think about your day tomorrow and plan your day tomorrow. And there's a couple of reasons why that works. A, when you start your day tomorrow, you'll land in your office or in your day with your feet on the ground and already starting. You're not asking yourself, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to get done today? You're in fact effective and productive right from the get-go. The second, and perhaps even more interesting thing, is that when you plan your day before it starts, your subconscious doesn't sleep. Your subconscious doesn't sleep. That's how our lungs continue to operate. That's how our heart continues to operate. And in fact, when you program your subconscious, when you declare, here's my list of things that I want to get done tomorrow, you have told your subconscious to process that list through the night, even while you're sleeping. And how many times have you woken up in the middle of the night, or woken up first thing in the morning, and have some clarity or a clear picture, or have solved 1 or 2 of the problems that you were stewing about the day before? And that, if that's ever happened to you, then that's happened because you had that on your mind when you've gone to sleep, and in the morning your brain has offered you a solution. And so you can do that in an organized way if you choose to spend 10 minutes before the end of the day to plan your next day. Ask yourself the question, what's the highest and best use of your time? In real estate, we're always asking the question, what's the best and highest use of your land? And so focus on the highest and best use is the most significant thing that you can do, and I'm going to offer you a tool to think about that in a minute. Learn to terminate and manage your phone calls. And as an example of that, if your computer has a sound, a noise, an indication of any kind that you've received a new email, then you no longer have control over your agenda. If your phone rings, if it actually does ring, makes a sound, or is vibrating, then in fact you've lost control of your phone and email. And what I mean by that is this. Tony Robbins says that we're most effective when we chunk our time into 2-hour blocks, chunk our time into 2 hours of activity against a particular objective. And that when we take an interruption, we lose, it takes about 20 minutes to return to the same level of focus and productivity as we had before we took the interruption. So before we noticed the ding of the email, before we took that phone call. And so if in a 2-hour chunk you take 3 interruptions, you've lost a full hour of high-level productivity. Now, I can anticipate some of you are thinking, well, geez, I got to be responsive to my clients. I got to be responsive to, people in my world. And yes, you do. That's absolutely true. And many of us have very demanding, interruption-rich environments. And here's what I propose or suggest you do. If you were to leave a voicemail, a outgoing message on your voicemail that sounds something like this: "Hi, it's John. Thanks for your call. I return all calls at 11, 1, and 4, and I'll return your call at the closest of one of those 3 times." Then virtually everybody will respect that. You've set some boundaries. People will respect those boundaries, and then in fact respect you because they understand that you're a highly effective, highly organized, highly productive person. And as long as you keep that promise and in fact do make the return call at 11, as I've suggested, and put 15 minutes in your calendar, then people will come to respect and in fact respect you more for it. So learn to control the phone and the email. Turn your phone off so it doesn't ring. Make the phone a servant of you rather than you a servant of your phone. Moving on, concentrate on key tasks and stay on them until they're 100% done. And I'm going to unpack that a little bit further. And then delegate all lower value tasks that can be done by someone else at a lower income or salary. And let me show you a way to do that. So here's something Tom Peters suggests. Have you in the last 30 days examined in detail, that's hour by hour, your calendar to evaluate the degree time actually spent mirrors your espoused priorities, and repeat this exercise with everyone on your team. So let me give you a way to do that. Anyone who wants this, feel free to send me an email and I'll send this little template out to you. For a week, keep track in as finite a chunk as you can. Lawyers say they keep track of their time to the 10th of an hour, so that means every 6 minutes they can tell you what they've been doing or who they've been charging for that time. If that's a bit onerous for you, then think in 15 minutes or even 30-minute chunks, and put in as much detail as you can what you're doing for 30 minutes for the full course of the week. Take an audit, take a survey of how you currently are spending your time. Now, I promise you, I've asked clients to do this, and many times, when we look and reflect back on how we're spending our time, it's not often pretty. Often it's a bit embarrassing. It's been embarrassing for me. It's been a bit embarrassing for clients that I've worked through with this, but it's been very enlightening as well. It's really helped to highlight when we're most productive, and in fact, we could be a lot more productive. And once we've made a list of made a record of how we've spent about a week's time, I'm going to invite you to do this thing called the Skill Fun Box. The Skill Fun Box. So you can see on the left, I've got the vertical axis says skill level, and the horizontal axis on the bottom says interest, enjoyment, or fun level. And so what I'd ask you to do is consider something like, what is something you do in your typical week that would be on your survey that is high fun? And by fun, I mean it pays well, it's rewarding, it matters most to you, it's the highest priority for your business. So high fun, high skill. And for many of us, that's, say, for example, meeting with a client. Our charge out rate might be $100 or $200 or $500. And so that's a significant value producing activity in our business. It's also something that's fun. We might say something like, prospecting is low interest but high skill. It takes a lot of effort to work through that. Something like, social media marketing for a lot of people is high fun but low skill. And then the bottom left quadrant, the low skill, low fun, is for lots of people. That's admin work, that's banking, that's organizing, all that kind of stuff. And what you'll do at the end of surveying, as I asked you to do in the previous slide, made a record of your entire week's activity and placed all of that activity into one of those 4 boxes. And what will become apparent to you is all the stuff you do in the high skill, high fun box is the $200, $300, $500 per hour, or the value producing activity in your business. And everything in the bottom left box, someone will do for you for $15 or $20 an hour. Someone will do that work, a personal assistant, a virtual assistant, an organizer. Lots of that work can be done by someone else, and you have lots of resources, your accountant, other people in your world that can help you get some of that stuff done. And for every hour that you can pull out of that low skill, low fun and apply in the high skill, high fun, you'll be replacing $20 hours with, let's say, $200 hours. And that's a significant shift in the value of your business. You also get value in fact because you're going away from work you hate to work you love. Employing someone, so that's a positive thing in itself. And even if you're fully booked and can't take on more clients, well, then you have both time and money freedom. You're free to choose. You have all the money that you need or want, so that you're then free to choose how you spend your time. And if you do that in terms of enriching your lifestyle, that's perfectly fine as well. What we're looking to do is use our time in a way that gives us the best life we want, the best business we want. And so here's an exercise that I encourage you to think about. Do an audit of your time, survey your time, and then allocate it into the skill fund box. Do an analysis of what's the highest value work, what's the lowest value work, and then ask yourself, how can I get more high value work done in my business and have someone else do the low value work. So a little tactic. So another thing you might want to think about is multitasking is worse than a lie. Multitasking is worse than a lie. Lots of people feel like they're fantastic multitaskers, and in fact, multitasking is a myth. What we're actually doing when we're multitasking is this thing called switch tasking. There's an exercise in this book, The Myth of Multitasking, Dave Crenshaw, and what he asks you to do is time yourself to write the phrase, multitasking is worse than a lie, but instead of writing that out in one continuous phrase, write it out this way. Write the letter M, then write a number 1, U and 2, L and 3, T and 4, and so we're alternating a letter and a number, all the way through. And usually when I ask audiences to do that, it usually takes about a minute, about 20 seconds or thereabouts. And then I'll ask an audience or a client to do a second version of this, and that's where they go and write strictly in one go, multitasking is worse than a lie, and in one go, the numbers 1 through 27. There's 27 letters, and it typically takes about half the time, sometimes a little less than that. And what people often recognize and feel is just how much confusion gets created as our brain jumps back and forth, switch tasks between writing a letter, writing a number, writing a letter, writing a number. If you're scoffing at me and saying, you're a great multitasker, I challenge you, get someone to take you through this exercise. If you're interested, I'll send you the instructions, and you can have some fun. It's kind of a fun party game if that's your idea of a good party. So multitasking is worse than a lie, and multitasking is a myth. The best way we're most productive when we chunk our time against one activity. So, to state the obvious, but often ignored, all we have is our time. the way we spend our time is our priorities, and the way we spend our time is our strategy. It's not what you say it is, it's what actually occurs, what in fact is on your calendar. So your calendar knows precisely what you really care about. Tom Peters, and my question for you tonight is, do you? Does your calendar match with your stated priorities? So Peter Drucker, if there's any one secret to effectiveness, it's concentration. Effective executives do the first things first. This is even before Stephen Covey, and they do one thing at a time, and they do one thing at a time. So you might take away that that's an important point. Multitasking is worse than a lie. So let's consider, is it time for a change? Is it time, there's an irony in this, of course, is it time for a change? And what I'd offer you is this thing called the formula for change, and it's a bit of arithmetic. Again, I'd offer you to, if you're interested in doing a little bit of research on this, just Google the phrase formula for change, and D stands for dissatisfaction, V for vision, F for first steps, and that has to be greater than resistance. That's the arithmetic symbol for greater than. And so it looks like this scales of justice, where the left-hand side, dissatisfaction times vision plus first steps, have to be greater than or heavier or outweigh our resistance for us to move forward. And so let me just unpack that for a minute. Dissatisfaction, another way to describe dissatisfaction is pain. Another way to describe vision is pleasure. If you ask yourself which one of the two is most motivating, pain more often motivates than vision. Which of the two has a greater upside? Vision has a greater upside. There's no limitation to vision except our imagination. So those two combined, and sometimes we have those two, but we don't know how to get started. We don't know how to eat an elephant. We don't know, how to climb Mount Everest except to take the first step. And so sometimes what holds us back is we're not clear. We don't have a clear picture of a path forward. And so resistance will continue to exist unless we have clarity and can see a path forward. And so again, that stuff on the left has to outweigh that stuff on the right. So, that means that we have to get beyond our comfort zone, because beyond our comfort zone is where all the magic happens. And if you think about your comfort zone, anything outside our comfort zone is our growing zone. Anything past our comfort zone is where we start to grow. And anything inside of our comfort zone is our dying zone. Let me ask you to imagine for a minute that at the edge of our comfort zone, we will feel, by definition, uncomfortable. And if that causes us to retreat from the edges, then in fact that edge shrinks back with us towards the center. So quick story, I'm a pretty good skier, loved skiing, would ski with my buddies. Then I moved to Toronto, didn't ski all the time. I would go out to go skiing with my buddies for a week in March. They'd been skiing all season in places that in previous times I would have loved going and was very comfortable going. But now that I hadn't been in the mountains, hadn't been exploring and pushing my edges, the very places they'd been all season and the very places I used to be able to go to easily now scared the pants off of me. My comfort zone had shrunk, and so it had become smaller. So in nature, as in humans, we are either growing or dying. There's no such thing as stasis. We are either growing or dying. And so the other thing about comfort is that if we go too far beyond our comfort zone, we get into that place of panic. We've now moved too far, too fast. And if we go even further, that's the danger zone. Now we're really stuck, and in fact probably threatening our health or a danger to ourselves. So this guy, Ilya Prigogine, got a Nobel Prize because he figured out this statement. And you can read this statement 10 times and still not, at least I can't figure out what the hell it means. But what it basically says is that there's an opposite to entropy, and entropy is nature's way of saying is things grow and then they die, except in this circumstance that he discovered of this thing called perturbation. He labeled it perturbation, and the root word of perturbation is perturb. And perturbed is how we feel, agitated is how we feel when we're at the edge of our comfort zone. And what he discovered is if you apply enough pressure in a contained space, perturbation can turn coal into diamonds. So enough pressure in a contained space can reverse entropy, can stop dying, and turn coal into something even more precious, into diamonds. And how that applies to us is we're going to use this metaphor of a pot of boiling water, and perturbation is heat. And there's you, and you're feeling some pressure. Something is pressuring you, and in the case of turning up the heat on the water, we'll see the surface of the water pop, and we'll see some steam emote, and in humans, it's emotion. And so if we want to have a breakthrough, we want to have a bit of perturbation. We want to feel a little uncomfortable. And so if I could offer the suggestion to you is, rather than shying away from perturbation, embrace it. It is a necessary prerequisite to growth. Perturbation and that feeling of discomfort is a sign that you're getting ready to grow, and that's something to embrace. Now, I won't say that it feels good. It doesn't, but it is something to embrace. And so Stephen Covey says the key to the ability to change is a changeless self of who you are and what you care about and what you value, and that's like the guiding light of your lighthouse or the guiding light of the North Star. Omar Bradley says, hey, it's time that we steer by the stars and not by the lights of each passing ship. So there you have it, a little bit of time management from Dr. Zeus and Stephen Covey and Keith Cunningham and Tom Peters and Ilya Pergogine and Omar Bradley, and a bit of an assist from me. And so if you'd like to get a copy of this presentation, feel free to send me an email, john@w5coaching.com. I'm happy to send that to you. I'm going to turn the floor over, Mark, to you, and to engage if there are any questions from the audience. And you know, at the same time, if you think about that or thinking about some of the things that I talked about tonight, and like to see how that applies to you, the first coffee is on me. It's a complimentary coaching session. Feel free to send me an email and we can get organized. If you're in town, we'll do that face-to-face. And if not, Skype and Google Hangout work fantastic. So let me just back up and, Mark, turn the floor over to you and see if there's any questions or anything people would like to discuss.
Excellent presentation, first and foremost, John. Definitely some blinding flashes of the obvious. What was the TLA at the top of it?
BFOs.
Yes.
Blinding flashes of the obvious, often accompanied with a slap to the forehead.
Yes, absolutely. Stuff that slips by the wayside when we get busy.
Yes.
No, excellent presentation. If there's any questions at all, please do just type them in the question panel, and we'll make sure to get those to John. The other ways to connect with John are on the community platform. John is on there. You can certainly get there. You can submit a lead. We'll pass that on to John Nieuwenburg. And you're a regular.
I promise that all of my details are available on the community site. So anybody who wants to look for me that way or didn't make a record of my email, feel free to look for them there. And I am a RTN member and will offer some form of, depends on the program that you choose, but there's a commission back to the network for any work that comes as a result of RTN.
Absolutely. And you're regular on in the West Side, and I see you all the time on Friday at the Buzz. So check for meetups, see where John is RSVPing, and do take him up on that cup of coffee. Great question. What do you suggest for people who have professions that are completely client-driven, like realtors, where all of a sudden you've got to drop everything you're doing, run to do an open house, a showing, all that sort of stuff? How do you sort of try and plan around that?
You know, the first thing you have to ask yourself is to get contemplate some perspective. Ultimately, your view, your relationship to time will govern your relationship with other people. So yes, there is an expectation that you are available to your clients. I have lots of realtors who are my clients. I've know people like interior designers and architects are constantly under demand. And if you subject yourself, and let me use a very blunt and frank term, if you whore yourself, you will then be available all the time, 24/7 to your clients. If, on the other hand, you respectfully say, here are the times I'm available, here's when I am not available, most people will respect that. And anytime you have a conversation that outlines your expectations. Um, let me declare this. When's the best time to deal with a problem? Most people will say it's when it occurs. And in
Well,
fact, what I would say, before it even happens. And so the best time as a realtor or an interior designer or any professional who has a service business, the best time to contemplate this question is right there, before at the initial engagement. And you might even use the example, Mr. Realtor, I'm with you at, or Mr. Client, I'm with you at the moment, and you'll see that my phone is shut off. I am not available at the moment to anyone else except you. Would you like me to respect that as far as you're concerned? Yes, of course you would. Well, then is it okay if I treat my other clients in the same way? And so that you can strike a bargain if you express it in terms that's meaningful to them. And if, for example, you're with a client and you took 3 or 4 phone calls during that period while you spent an hour with that client, I can virtually promise you that you won't have a client, because that client will recognize that you're playing second fiddle. So it is about establishing priorities, establishing boundaries, um, uh, negotiating expectations together. And it's not a perfect world. I'm if some of you are kind of rolling your eyes and saying, well, that's la la land. Yeah, no question it's demanding. I would say, though, that it's a lot less demanding than you might expect if you shifted the way that you think about your time and what's reasonable for others to have as expectations of you. And if you couch it in the language of expectations for them and how they'd like to be treated, those same people will respect you and your other clients um, at the same time.
absolutely. It's all that, that those interruptions that are urgent but not important,
For
not
sure,
as important.
just sit down with a client and start doing email. No one, you'd be insane to do that. And so if it's not fair to do email or paying attention to something else while you're with a client, then by definition, that means there's going to be other occasions where you're not available. And so, go back. If you're really responsive, you might even say something like, I return calls at the top of every hour, and in between I'm busy.
Yeah, it's
At
absolutely
8 o'clock,
managing.
9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of my life.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
managing expectations.
absolutely managing yourself and your expectations. Yes,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
at the same time, I believe you can be responsive.
absolutely. But I think, even something as simple as including a statement in your signature file or changing your voicemail message. If this has gone straight to voicemail, I'm tied up with a client. I generally will respond within 2 hours or something along those lines. And then, so long as you then live up to that commitment, or it may be I return my calls once a day. Maybe that works in your particular business.
Yeah,
It may not in some others. Or I
it
respond to my
depends.
emails within 24 hours.
This is a sorry to interrupt you, Mark. This is an example of whoever's asking that question, whichever realtors or people that live with that demand, they will be at the edge of their comfort zone. They will be in perturbation as they attempt to make that shift, as they shift over to taking a bit more control over their time and shifting their expectations for themselves, and then in turn the expectations that others can have of them. I think it was back here where Covey said this: the ability to change is a changeless sense of who you are and what you're about and what you value. So start with that. Do you value others more than you value yourself? Well, if that's the case, then you're always going to be a victim to someone pulling your chain.
And of course, it's a tough market right now as well.
Well,
We want to be answering that phone as well.
well, if you want to conduct yourself that way, then so be it. If you're looking for a solution or an answer, or want to do things a little
Yeah,
differently, then there are solutions available.
absolutely. A couple of questions here. What do you think about the David Allen Getting Things Done program?
I've heard lots of good things about it. I know there's a lot of proponents of that. I don't know it very well, to be honest. There's a great combination that I've seen of tying together GTD, getting things done, with Evernote. There's some clever people who have put together a little system around that. I can't really comment on it. I don't really I haven't really studied the system. I don't know what to tell you about it. Other than there's lots of people who think it's great.
Yeah. Um, the comment came in with the respect to the last discussion. Generally true, but if you have a high revenue client, you may want to make an exception. Um, there's
Well,
always exceptions to
let
every rule.
me let me offer this analogy or a bit of a story. It's a little bit off color, but it'll make the point. A very well-to-do businessman sees a beautiful, stunning-looking woman on the corner and approaches her and says, "Would you go to bed with me for $1 million?" The indecent proposal. And this person thinks about it for a minute, and yeah, I guess sure, yeah, I will. I'll go to bed with you for $1 million. And then the businessman says, "Well, would you go to bed with me for $100?" And the woman says, "$100? What do you think I am?" To which the businessman says, "We've established what you are. I just now need to know the price."
Yeah.
So whether it's if $1 million client means more than $100 client, and you're willing to compromise or conduct yourself differently there, then that's fine. Just again, recognize that you're changing, and that you're willing, on the other hand, to tolerate some of the other things that are going to exist in your life. Stress and urgency, and feeling a loss of control because others are dominating what you're doing, or
Uh,
dominating what the things that you pay attention to.
another,
So I'm being a bit hard-nosed or blunt or a bit edgy about it. I do appreciate, believe me, I do appreciate that it is a balancing act, and lots of times we're aligned and it's working, and sometimes it isn't. And tonight, I hope that I've offered you some ways to at least reconsider, have a think, and reevaluate what your top priorities are, and how therefore your time gets aligned so that you achieve those things.
another question. I find I'm always in emergency mode all the time, putting fires out. I'd like one tip
Yeah,
from you.
that's the hamster in a wheel um, strategy, isn't it?
Yep.
The hamster strategy for getting more done is running faster. And eventually we die from fatigue, or the hamster dies from fatigue. And that's that quadrant, the left front seat on this British car, of the urgent and important, which then becomes tyrannical. It's tyranny. It is a unrelenting, demanding, uh, and will suck up all of our time if, in fact, we let it. So the shift that has to occur is not so much the stuff that occupies that time, it's the relationship we have with that stuff. We've been talking about the relationship, personal relationship with time. If you want to see a shift, then it isn't so much what's in that time, it's how you think about it. And therefore, as a result, you'll be thinking some of this stuff someone else has got to be doing, because the stuff on the right hand, the driver's seat of this car, is more meaningful, more important, and is going to lead to a more productive, richer life.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can. It's a slippery slope, and it accelerates quickly.
It is one of those things. I mean, it sounds like that they're constantly reacting. So taking that
Yes,
step back and really taking a look at what is it that you're reacting to, and what is it
exactly.
that you shouldn't or don't need to be reacting to, or what is it that you can seem to be reacting to the same things all the time, and can you have a planned response? And
Yeah.
just
So
taking that step back and really analyzing what is it that you're always reacting to, and is there
yeah,
something you can do ahead of time in terms of communicating something different? I don't know. Otherwise,
yeah.
keep on the wheel.
Well, many of us have relationships with partners, wives, spouses, and from time to time, those relationships have a reset as we evaluate and think, and encourage some things, and want to discourage some things that are happening in our relationship. And if that's true in our relationships with others, why not our relationship with time? Have a reset. The two most common strategies that I see people employing that leads to stress is, the first one is hamster in a wheel, and the one that I just heard you describe is whack-a-mole. It, we're just whacking the next thing, hitting on the head whatever comes up next, without rhyme or reason about whether or not that next thing is in fact the best and highest use of our time.
Yeah, the definition of
So,
insanity, or one definition of insanity, is
yeah,
doing the same thing expecting a different result.
exactly. So, if you like that person who feels that way, take a few minutes a day to do a survey of your time. Do that exercise where you audit your time and then fit it into the skill fund box. And 9 out of 10 times when I've done that with a client, it's a very enlightening, eyebrow raising, palpitating kind of reality check.
Aha moment.
Aha, that'd be a BFO.
And quickly followed by the forehead slap.
By the slap, exactly. So, it could be frustrating when you're in that, doing the hamster wheel or when you're playing whack a mole. And so, the thing I'd encourage you to do is to breathe, give yourself a bit of space, and have a think.
And just
Give
bear in mind
yourself the,
when you're going through the process, I'm a huge fan of the Pareto effect. Most of us know as the 80-20 rule. When you're doing this, you'll probably find that
yes,
80% of your problems, 80% of the fires that you're putting out, being caused by 20% of your clients, maybe, or maybe it's even 95-5. And it's okay in some of
yeah.
those cases to fire some clients and focus on the ones that are generating 80% of your revenues, which is generally a different 20%.
The other way that the Pareto's rule exists is this perfidy known as perfectionism. We agree that workaholism is a disease and alcoholism, everyone agree, was a disease. But I would say to you that perfectionism is just as undermining as some of these other things, because as we strive to get the perfect, perfect, perfect out of fear for success or the fear of failure, that prevents us from, accomplishing. And so the 80% of the value, I would say to you, very, very often is acquired in 20% of the effort. And that last 20% has a very sharp line of diminishing returns. The more and more and more we perfect, the less and less result we get. And if I can put that in different terms, a $20 bottle of wine is lovely. A $100 bottle of wine is not 5 times better. It may be better for sure. Most of that betterness exists in our perception of it, but there's no question that it's not 100 times better. And that's the thing that you've got to be managing as you're completing work and saying, yes, this particular project requires my best and I'll give it 100%. Lots and lots of our projects would be well served with the 80% rule.
I know many people on our network that their reluctance to get up in front of the room is because they have yet to perfect their presentation, or their reluctance to go out
Yes.
and start selling is because their website isn't quite perfect yet. It never will be. You're
Well,
absolutely right.
let me offer a couple of thoughts on that. Is anything worth doing well is worth doing badly to start with. So give yourself permission to be crappy at it to begin.
Fail forwards.
And I'm pretty sure 99 out of 100 people on this call know how to ride a bicycle. And I'm going to ask you, have you always known to ride a bike? And of course, all of us didn't. And we learned to ride a bike and we fell a few times and skinned our knees. And we got some help, and mom or dad or someone held the bicycle seat until we figured out how to do it. And we persevered. And why did we do that? We persevered because we wanted to learn. And so if you want to become better at presenting, get up there and learn how to do it. And what did you say, Mark, at the beginning? There's no wrong answer to the right people, and everyone in that audience will give you lots of support and help and positive feedback.
Absolutely.
Anything worth doing well is worth doing crappy to begin with.
Fail forwards. You can't say the wrong thing to the right people.
Fail forward, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic presentation. Really enjoyed it. We've kind of run the full hour now, so we'll wrap it up out of respect for everybody's time. If you've got any other questions, you just put your email back up on screen for us, John, so we can get a hold of you and take you up on the offer to get the presentation. John at w5coaching.com. Next week is apparently a long weekend. That's crept up on us all. So there will be no training or Monday evening webinar next week. The week following, Andrew Mackey, our community partner in Tri-Cities, is going to be doing a communication workshop, and he does a fantastic job. So I would strongly encourage you to come on out and really take a look at who you're communicating to, and it may not be who you think it is. He does a great job with that workshop, so I strongly encourage you to plug into that, not next week, but the week after. Thank you so much for that, John. Always a pleasure, always a ton of notes scribbled down here, and I hope everybody got as much value as I certainly did in your presentation this evening.
Thanks
Thanks a
for the
lot, guys.
opportunity, Mark. I really appreciate it. Cheers.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye for now.